The streets of Maputo were a no-go zone for the faint of heart as police and protesters each flexed their power. Dubbed the Day of Freedom, demonstrators heeded a call by opposition presidential candidate Venancio Mondlane on social media to protest the outcome of the October 9 vote. Police fired rubber bullets and tear gas to try and disperse the crowd. Human rights groups say at least 18 people have been killed in the protests. Residents in Maputo are now deeply concerned.
I
think the situation is terrible. For better or for worse, what is happening is harming the population. We're the ones who are suffering. I think the parties should sit down and talk for the good of the population because we are suffering.
This situation is very, very bad because more people, kids, and people are dying. This is a bad situation in Mozambique now.
Mondlane, who has a following among the country's disenfranchised youth, called the vote fraudulent and lodged an appeal at the Constitutional Council, along with a call for street protests. Meanwhile, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights has called for a de-escalation on both sides. Joy Kiruki Juma, CGTN.
Let's discuss this event further. We're joined by P.S. Pigu, the head of the Southern African program at the Institute of Security Studies in South Africa. P.S., thank you for your time this afternoon. What are your thoughts on what's happening in Mozambique following last month's election?
Good afternoon, and good afternoon to your viewers. Well, we're in uncharted territory. The kind of protests that we've seen over the post-election period have been unprecedented, both in terms of the scale and in terms of how widespread they have been, reaching into a number of constituencies that go beyond the grouping that has been mentioned in your insert about young alienated youth that are falling behind Venancio Mondlane, the opposition leader. So this, I think, has taken a number of people by surprise in terms of the momentum of the protests and the fact that they have continued. As your report says, we've seen a number of deaths. The figure that was put in front of me yesterday was over 30, with over 100 or so injured by gunfire and thousands detained over the last week or so. But I think I should make it clear that the picture that we have is limited. Social media and internet access have been restricted by the state on a number of occasions. So, as I said, the picture of the footprint of protests is a little uneven. But it does look as though we may be heading towards a calming of that situation. But as I said, there are many unanswered questions about what's in play at the moment.
Right, and the disillusioned youth of Mozambique seem to support the opposition's demand for protests. What do you make of this?
Well, the election itself has massive credibility problems associated with it. This won't be the first time that that's happened in Mozambique. Unfortunately, it has a long history of elections since the introduction of multi-party democracy in 1994, of having elections that are politically manipulated and do not pass standards of a credible, free and fair process. So we have those issues in play, and we have large numbers of Mozambican, particularly youth, who do not feel serviced by the state itself. So we've seen a kind of an erosion of the social contract. This is not unique to Mozambique region by any means, but it has been particularly acute in the context of widespread corruption scandals and other concerns relating to the venality of a political and economic elite in Mozambique that is simply not servicing the interests of a wider population.
And having said that, what's next for Mozambique?
Well, good question. As I said, we're in uncharted territory. I think we're likely to see a containment of the existing protests, but this will not necessarily lead to a resolution of the issues that are behind these protests. And I think therein lies the problem. Frelimo, the ruling party, which has been in power now for 49 years, can put a lid on this. It has a monopoly in terms of control over the infrastructure of state security forces, of course. So it's able to contain these issues, but that doesn't provide a resolution. And I think one of the concerns that will be in play is that the opposition have seen all sorts of opportunities in the last couple of weeks that have exposed the weaknesses and the vulnerabilities of the state. The state, in turn, has turned around and accused the opposition of criminal behavior, of a nefarious agenda to undermine the legitimacy of the election process and the election outcomes, and have pointed to everyone, say, use existing remedial mechanisms, use the existing institutions of state. But the fundamental problem here is that the institutions of state, the electoral management bodies, and democracy supporting institutions in Mozambique are not trusted by large parts of the population who believe it is compromised. So we see calls from within the opposition ranks, particularly for some kind of dialogue, but I don't think there'll be much traction for that within the ruling party, which is fractured in many ways, but I think is facing an existential crisis at the moment, which is likely to mean that it comes together around a singular objective of power retention.